The Untold Story of Don Johnson's Five Children, A Legacy in Spotlight and Shadows. Don Johnson. The name instantly conjures images of pastel suits, fast cars, and the neon glow of 1980s Miami. As the star of Miami Vice, he became an icon of cool, embodying the swagger and charisma of Detective Sonny Crockett. But behind the fame, the awards, and the headlines of his whirlwind romances lies another story, one less flashy, far more intimate, and infinitely more complicated. It's the story of his five children. Each child was born into a world of bright lights and constant scrutiny. Some chose to embrace the entertainment industry, carving their own paths in film and television. Others preferred lives away from the spotlight, where they could quietly build careers and families of their own. But being the child of Don Johnson, a man whose personal life was as colorful as his on-screen characters, came with both privileges and challenges. What happened to Don Johnson's children? How did they navigate the weight of their father's legacy and the shadow cast by his turbulent personal life? Today, we uncover the untold story of Jesse, Dakota, Grace, Jasper, and Deacon Johnson. But before we meet them, we need to understand the man at the center of it all, the father whose choices, triumphs, and flaws would shape their worlds. Don Johnson, from Kansas to Hollywood fame. Donnie Wayne Johnson was born on December 15, 1949, in Flat Creek, Missouri, and raised in Wichita, Kansas. His beginnings were far from glamorous. His father was a farmer, his mother worked as a beautician, and money was always tight. Don often described his childhood as rough, one where he felt restless, yearning for something bigger than the confines of small-town life. In high school, he discovered drama class, and suddenly the stage became an escape hatch. Acting gave him both confidence and purpose. After graduation, he attended the University of Kansas and later transferred to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco. But it wasn't an easy path. He struggled financially, often scraping by with small roles and odd jobs while chasing his dream. The breakthrough came in the 1980s when Don landed the role of Sonny Crockett in Miami Vice. The show was unlike anything television had seen before, slick, stylish, and drenched in pop culture cool. Don Johnson wasn't just acting in a series, he became part of a cultural revolution. Overnight, he went from a struggling actor to one of the biggest stars in the world. With fame came fortune. He won a Golden Globe, dated celebrities, and became a tabloid fixture. But with fortune also came chaos. His personal life was filled with whirlwind romances, including high-profile relationships with Melanie Griffith, Patty D'Arbanville, and even Barbra Streisand. Through it all, children entered his life at different times, in different circumstances, each one shaping a new chapter in his journey as a father. Yet fatherhood wasn't always easy for Don. In interviews, he admitted he wasn't always present in his older children's early lives, distracted by career highs and personal struggles. But as he aged, he began to embrace the role more fully, forming deeper bonds with his younger children. And that's where the story turns, because while Don Johnson's fame is cemented in Hollywood history, his real legacy lives on through his five children, each carrying a piece of him, yet determined to build identities of their own. Jesse Johnson, the firstborn. Before the world came to know Don Johnson as the stylish Detective Sonny Crockett, he was already a father. In December 1982, Don welcomed his first child, Jesse Wayne Johnson, with actress Patty D'Arbanville. At the time, Don was still climbing the Hollywood ladder, and Jesse's earliest years were spent watching his father balance career struggles with sudden stardom. Growing up, Jesse lived between two worlds. On one hand, he had a father who would soon become a global icon, recognizable on magazine covers and billboards. On the other hand, his mother, Patty, was also a working actress, known for her roles in Bilitis and Wise Guy. For Jesse, the entertainment industry wasn't just something he watched on TV, it was the family business. As a teenager, Jesse was drawn to the same creative energy that defined his parents. He studied acting and music, determined to carve out a career for himself, not as Don Johnson's son, but as Jesse Johnson. Still, the comparisons were inevitable. With his father's rugged looks and easy charm, casting directors often expected him to step into Don's shadow. Jesse made his television debut in the early 2000s, appearing in Nash Bridges, the police drama starring his father. It was a fitting start, almost symbolic, a way for father and son to share the screen. But Jesse didn't want to be confined to cameos or family associations. He branched out, working in both film and TV, with credits in projects like Redline, Killing Lincoln, and From Dusk Till Dawn, the series. Music also played a role in Jesse's life. Much like his father, who once had a hit single with Heartbeat, Jesse explored songwriting and performing. He spent time playing guitar and immersing himself in the Los Angeles music scene, though he always kept a lower profile than many Hollywood offspring. Despite his talents, Jesse never chased the relentless spotlight. Unlike his sister Dakota, who would go on to become a household name, Jesse often seemed more comfortable staying under the radar. Interviews with him paint the picture of a man focused on craft rather than fame, someone who preferred steady, meaningful work over blockbuster attention. Yet Jesse's bond with his father has remained strong. Over the years, Don has spoken with pride about Jesse, acknowledging that fatherhood was a different experience for him in the 1980s compared to later in life. Back then, his career consumed him, but he admired Jesse's resilience and independence. Today, Jesse lives quietly compared to his siblings, continuing to act and write music on his own terms. For Don Johnson, Jesse represents his first step into fatherhood, a son who inherited both the artistic drive of his parents and the strength to walk his own path, even if that meant living away from Hollywood's brightest lights. But Jesse was only the beginning. Just a few years later, Don would welcome a daughter into the world, one who would take the Johnson name to global heights. Dakota Johnson, the rising star who surpassed them all. When Dakota Mae Johnson was born on October 4, 1989, she was already Hollywood royalty. Her father, Don Johnson, was still basking in the glow of Miami Vice, while her mother, Melanie Griffith, was a celebrated actress herself. To make matters even more star-studded, her grandmother was none other than screen legend Tippi Hedren, the Hitchcock muse from The Birds. Few children enter the world with so much cinematic lineage woven into their DNA. Growing up in the glare of such a powerful Hollywood family wasn't easy. Paparazzi followed Dawn and Melanie relentlessly, and Dakota often found herself splashed across magazines before she could even spell her name. Her parents' relationship was famously turbulent. They married, divorced, remarried, and divorced again, and Dakota spent much of her childhood moving between households, sometimes with her stepfather Antonio Banderas, who would become a surprisingly steady figure in her life. Despite the chaos, Dakota was fascinated by the world her parents inhabited. She attended movie premieres, walked red carpets as a teenager, and even appeared in a photo shoot for Teen Vogue at age 12. But while she loved the glamour, she also absorbed the instability that came with it. In interviews, Dakota has admitted she struggled with anxiety and insecurity as a young woman, often feeling like she didn't quite belong anywhere. Her career began in 1999 with a small role in Crazy in Alabama, a film directed by Banderas and starring her mother. But Dakota's real breakout wouldn't come until much later. After a few years of modeling and minor roles, she landed a part in David Fincher's The Social Network in 2010, where she played a brief but memorable scene opposite Justin Timberlake. It was a turning point. Suddenly, casting directors began to see her as more than Dawn and Melanie's daughter. Then came the role that would change everything. Anastasia Steele in 50 Shades of Grey, 2015. The film, based on the best-selling novels, became a global sensation. While critics were divided, Dakota's performance catapulted her to international fame. She reprised the role in 2 sequels, and despite the mixed reviews, the trilogy cemented her as a leading lady in Hollywood. But Dakota didn't stop there. Determined to prove her range, she took on diverse projects, from the horror remake Suspiria to the indie darling The Peanut Butter Falcon, where she starred alongside Shia LaBeouf and Zach Gottsagen. She also showcased her comedic chops in How to Be Single and her dramatic weight in Our Friend. Each role added layers to her reputation as one of the most versatile actresses of her generation. Her relationship with her father, Don, has been described as both loving and complex. In public appearances, Don has proudly supported Dakota's career, attending premieres and praising her talent. Privately, Dakota has spoken of her admiration for her father's resilience and work ethic, though she's also acknowledged the challenges of growing up in such a high-profile family. Today, Dakota Johnson is more than just a famous child of Hollywood. She's a bona fide star, carving her own legacy that arguably surpasses even Dawn's. With upcoming roles in blockbusters like Madame Web and her own production company, Tea Time Pictures, Dakota has proven she's not just carrying the Johnson name, she's redefining it for a new generation. But Don's story as a father didn't end with his most famous daughter. After Dakota came a new chapter, one filled with younger children, where Don, now older and more seasoned, embraced fatherhood in a very different way. Grace Johnson, the model, with a quiet grace. By the late 1990s, Don Johnson's life had shifted dramatically. The wild days of Miami Vice and nonstop tabloid coverage were behind him, and with his marriage to Kelly Fleeger, a San Francisco schoolteacher, he found something he had rarely known before: stability. Out of that union came his third child, and first with Kelly, a daughter named Grace, born in December 1999. For Grace, childhood was very different compared to her older siblings. While Jesse and Dakota had grown up in the chaos of Don's Hollywood heyday, Grace was raised in a calmer environment. Don was no longer chasing fame or scrambling for his place in Hollywood. Instead, he was an established figure, financially secure, and much more present as a father. Grace grew up in the family's quiet ranch in Colorado, as well as their home in Los Angeles, surrounded by open spaces rather than flashing cameras. Despite her father's fame, Grace carved out her own interests. As she grew into her teenage years, it became clear she had inherited the Johnson family's striking looks and presence. But instead of following her father and sister into acting, Grace turned toward fashion and modeling. Grace made her modeling debut as a teenager, signing with IMG Models, one of the most prestigious agencies in the industry. With her tall frame, dark hair, and natural elegance, she quickly began appearing in campaigns and magazine spreads. She has walked runways and built a reputation as a rising name in fashion, though she tends to keep her profile relatively low compared to some celebrity offspring. What makes Grace's journey interesting is the balance she has managed to maintain. On one hand, she embraces the opportunities that come with her background, modeling in elite circles, rubbing shoulders with designers, and attending fashion weeks. On the other hand, she has avoided the excessive spotlight that can often overwhelm young models with famous last names. Grace has been careful about the projects she takes on, and she speaks often about valuing education and independence. Don Johnson has expressed deep admiration for Grace, often describing her as strong-willed, intelligent, and compassionate. In interviews, he's hinted that his younger children, Grace included, benefited from the fact that he had matured by the time they were born. With them, he was more patient, more settled, and more eager to embrace the daily responsibilities of fatherhood. Grace's relationship with her half-siblings is also notable. Though Dakota's Hollywood fame is on another level, Grace has appeared alongside her at public events, showing a family bond that transcends career choices. She has also been spotted supporting Jesse and spending time with her younger brothers Jasper and Deacon, proving that despite the wide age gap between Don's children, there is genuine closeness. Today, Grace Johnson continues to rise in the modeling world, but on her own terms. She represents a new era of the Johnson family, one less tied to Hollywood drama and more focused on individual growth. Grace may not be starring in movies or grabbing headlines like Dakota, but in her quiet grace, she carries forward her family's legacy with elegance. And just a few years after Grace, Don would add even more to his family tree, welcoming sons Jasper and Deacon, two boys who would experience Don in his most grounded chapter of life. Jasper Johnson, the athlete of the family. When Jasper Breckenridge Johnson was born on June 6, 2002, Don Johnson was already in his early 50s. By then, he had lived several lifetimes, the fame, the scandals, the ups and downs of Hollywood. But with his marriage to Kelly Fleeger, Don had entered a more settled, grounded era, and Jasper would grow up reaping the benefits of a father who was no longer distracted by the chaos of Hollywood, but instead eager to be present. Unlike his older siblings, Jasper didn't gravitate toward Hollywood or fashion. Instead, he found his passion in athletics. From a young age, he showed a natural gift for sports, tall, lean, and competitive. While most of the Johnson children inherited their parents' artistic flair, Jasper seemed to have a different kind of discipline, one that thrived on the structure and challenges of athletic competition. Basketball quickly became his calling. Throughout high school, Jasper made headlines as a standout player. A guard with speed, agility, and court vision, he developed into a serious prospect. Local California sports news often covered his performances, praising both his talent and his relentless work ethic. For a time, it looked as though Jasper was on track for a collegiate, and possibly even professional, basketball career. But sports, much like Hollywood, can be unpredictable. Jasper's journey was not without its obstacles. Injuries, competition, and the sheer difficulty of making it to the next level meant his basketball story didn't follow the path some expected. Yet, even as challenges arose, Jasper remained committed to pursuing his athletic dreams, balancing sports with academics and carving out his own identity far from the red carpets his father and sister so often walked. Don Johnson has often spoken about his admiration for Jasper's determination. In interviews, he described his son as a force of nature, someone who pushes himself not for fame, but for personal growth. Jasper's approach to life reflects the stability Don found with Kelly, a steady rhythm that gave his younger children the grounding his older ones didn't always have. What makes Jasper's story stand out is how different it is from the Hollywood narrative often expected of celebrity children. He didn't chase cameras or scripts, he chased basketballs and victory. While Dakota was making blockbuster films and Grace was gracing magazine covers, Jasper was sweating it out on the court, driven by his own set of goals. Today, Jasper continues to pursue opportunities within sports and beyond. Whether his future lies in basketball, coaching, or another profession entirely, he has already made it clear that his story won't be a copy of his father's or siblings'. Jasper Johnson represents the branch of the family tree that thrives on discipline, competition, and resilience, qualities that, in their own way, reflect Don's journey of grit and reinvention. And just 2 years later, Don and Kelly would welcome yet another child, their youngest son, Deacon, whose life would be shaped not by Hollywood fame or athletic ambition, but by growing up in the warmth of a closely bonded family. Deacon Johnson, the youngest of the legacy. In April 2006, at the age of 56, Don Johnson became a father for the fifth time. His youngest son, Deacon, was born into a world very different from the one that had greeted Jesse in the early 1980s or even Dakota in the late 80s. By the time Deacon arrived, Don was no longer the hard-living Hollywood heartthrob. He was a seasoned man, grounded by nearly a decade of marriage to Kelly Flieger and years of lessons learned from his older children. For Deacon, life has been defined by stability and privacy. Raised largely outside of the Hollywood chaos that consumed his father's earlier years, he has enjoyed a childhood filled with normalcy, school events, sports, and the quiet rhythm of family life in Colorado and Los Angeles. While his siblings had grown up under the constant glare of paparazzi lenses, Deacon has mostly been shielded from it, thanks in large part to Don and Kelly's conscious effort to protect their youngest son from the relentless spotlight. Public appearances by Deacon have been rare, but when he has been seen, he bears a striking resemblance to his father in his youth. Sharp features, expressive eyes, and a natural charisma. Still, unlike Dakota or even Grace, Deacon has not pursued a career in entertainment or fashion. Instead, he has been allowed to grow at his own pace, free from the pressure of a famous surname. Those close to the family describe Deacon as thoughtful and creative, with a natural curiosity about the world. He shares a close bond with his siblings, particularly Jasper, who is closest to him in age. The two boys have often been spotted together at public events, their camaraderie reflecting the quieter, more traditional family life Don built later in life. For Don Johnson, Deacon represents a kind of full-circle redemption. In his early years of fatherhood, he was often absent, consumed by career and personal struggles. But with Deacon, he has been present, coaching, guiding, and enjoying the simple joys of parenting. In interviews, Don has acknowledged that he sees raising his younger children as a second chance to do things differently. Today, Deacon remains mostly out of the public eye, still too young to decide whether he will step into Hollywood, sports, or an entirely different field. But one thing is clear: he has been given the gift of a grounded upbringing, supported by both parents and surrounded by siblings who have already blazed diverse paths. As Don enters his later years, Deacon symbolizes his softer, more reflective side, the proof that even a man once defined by flash and turbulence could build a foundation of love and stability for his family, a legacy beyond the spotlight. Don Johnson's life has always been a study in contrasts. He rose from a modest upbringing in Kansas to become one of the most recognizable faces of the 1980s. He embodied the glamour, excess, and rebellion of Hollywood at its flashiest peak, yet his private journey as a father tells a far more layered story. His firstborn, Jesse, grew up in the storm of Don's early fame, learning resilience while carving his own quiet path as an actor and musician. Dakota, thrust into the brightest spotlight of them all, not only embraced Hollywood, but redefined it, proving herself as a force independent of her famous last name. Grace, with her elegance and poise, chose the runway over the big screen, crafting her own story in the world of fashion. Jasper, with his passion for basketball, showed that not every Johnson child needed to live under Hollywood's gaze to pursue greatness. And finally, Deacon, the youngest, represents Don's second chance at fatherhood. The son who grew up with stability, love, and the lessons of a father who had matured with time. Together, they form a portrait not of perfection, but of evolution. Don Johnson's children reflect the many versions of the man himself: the dreamer, the star, the survivor, and ultimately, the father who tried to be better with each new chapter. It's easy to look at Hollywood families and assume their stories are scripted, predictable, and privileged. But behind every famous last name lies real people. Children finding their way, often carrying both the benefits and the burdens of their parents' fame. For the Johnson children, that journey has been about more than just living up to Don's legacy. It's been about creating their own. And perhaps that's the real untold story here. Don Johnson's career will forever be remembered for Miami Vice, for Sonny Crockett's cool demeanor and fast cars. But his true legacy is written in the lives of Jesse, Dakota, Grace, Jasper, and Deacon, 5 very different paths, bound together by the same name, yet defined by individuality. As the years go on, Hollywood will continue to spotlight Dakota's film roles, Grace's modeling campaigns, or perhaps even Jasper's next steps in sports. But behind those headlines remains the quiet truth: a father who, despite the turbulence of his early years, found redemption through his children. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Fame fades, trends change, but family, with all its complications, heartbreaks, and triumphs, endures. So the next time you think of Don Johnson, don't just picture the pastel suits and neon glow of Miami Vice. Remember the 5 lives that carry forward his story in ways far more meaningful than any television role ever could. Because in the end, the untold story of Don Johnson's 5 children isn't about Hollywood at all. It's about love, growth, and the enduring power of family. And if you've enjoyed this journey into the hidden lives of celebrity families, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories like this one. Which star's children should we cover next? Let us know in the comments below.